It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress negatively affect your biological genes and in turn create sickness long term. Human beings, due to the size of the neocortex, can activate the stress hormone just by thought alone and turn on the biological chemicals that run throughout the mind and body. This means that our thoughts alone can make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts can make us sick, then it's possible our thoughts can make us better. For example, you have a thought which triggers a subconscious program to start running, which is based on past experience. This then releases a chemical rush throughout the body, which we feel as an emotion. So if you have a fearful thought, you are going to feel anxiety. Whereas if you have a loving thought, you are going to feel peace. And remember, the moment you feel anxiety, your mind and body hones in on this thought and starts to create more thoughts in line with this one. And now the negative cycle begins. And if this thinking pattern continues daily, you are now implementing a long-term habit into the subconscious mind. So if we can create negative chemical habits that unbalance us, then we can create positive chemical habits that heal us. However, when the time comes to actually change your habits, it's not as easy as it sounds. This might be down to the fact that you have been using this habit for years, and the mind responds with rejection to change. This is when we start to create thoughts that hold us back, such as, what, you're just going to stop suffering, or stop feeling guilty, shameful, and you're not going to complain or blame or make excuses. Therefore, the mind just wants to return back to what's familiar, hence why it's so hard to break a habit at first. Suddenly, the thoughts start influencing your behaviour by saying things like, we can just start tomorrow, or you're too much like your dad and you'll never change, so why bother? Or this isn't going to work just for me. However, if you start to respond to these thoughts as if they're true, then the same thoughts will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behaviour, which creates the same experience, which produces the same emotions. And then an even bigger cycle begins. And this is why repetition is so important. You need to keep reinforcing this positive behaviour until it becomes subconscious or a habit. This is why so many people aren't successful at changing their habits, because they fail once or twice and think that they can't do it, when in reality, they just need to keep going and keep reinforcing the new thoughts and behaviour until you change the chemical pattern. And this is quite easy for us to do because we have a huge frontal lobe dedicated to this type of thing. In fact, your frontal lobe takes up 40% of your brain. And most people, when they have a thought, automatically think that this thought is true, when in fact your thoughts are a creation from your past experience and future assumptions, which could easily be based on incorrect information due to sensory input, perception, biasness, cognitive distortions, and our limited capacity to see the world at its full potential. Scientists have shown us that we think around 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as yesterday. And if you believe that these thoughts are a representation of you, then you are not going to change very much. Because as we discussed earlier, the same thoughts lead to the same choices, the same behaviour, the same experience, and the same emotions. But to stop these negative thoughts is to become consciously aware of them. You have to start to become more aware of how you think, act, and feel. This is known as metacognition, and it's important for people to become aware of their present state so they can learn to think for themselves. Because the more conscious you become of those unconscious thoughts, the less likely you are to go unconscious during the day, giving you more power to make changes to your life where necessary, rather than just following along with your misleading negative thoughts. Also, as you become familiar with your thoughts, behaviour, and the emotions of your old self, as you fire and wire new thoughts, and condition your body into a new emotional state, you will become more consciously aware of the present moment and how life really is, compared to living in the past and being controlled by your unhelpful thoughts and emotions. This is so important, just like when maintaining a beautiful garden. You've got to get rid of the weeds or negative thoughts from the past. This allows you to move any emotional blocks so you can make room to plant new plants or flowers or positive thoughts. And this is also where you will learn the most about yourself and grow, because the moment you move into an uncomfortable state, a subconscious program instantly starts to run. When a program jumps in, it's usually because the person doesn't want to be conscious and engage in the present moment. So when you teach people how to override that program by gaining higher levels of consciousness, you can transform their lives. And that's exactly what we do at Self-Coaching UK. And the benefits of this is that you are less likely to be emotionally reactive, less likely to be so rigid, less likely to believe the thoughts that you are thinking without consideration. But first, you have to learn how to unlearn your old habits before you can develop new ones. We have to break the habit down of the old self before we can reinvent the new self, the ideal self. We have to disconnect synapse connections and connect new ones. We have to unfire and unwire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, then recondition the body to a new mind. For example, the stronger the emotional reaction you have to something, the higher the emotional outcome. And long-term memories are created from emotional experiences, whether that's negative or positive. So when you have an emotional reaction to someone or something, most people think that they can't control their emotional reaction. Well, it turns out if you allow that emotional reaction, also known as a refractory period, to last for days, you will develop a new subconscious habit in the mind. But also you will develop a dependency habit in the body due to the chemical release it receives when you are in these emotional states. And you can see this with people who have had something happen to them years ago. Yet years later, when you ask them what's wrong, they still can't move past this experience, which has affected them emotionally and physically, because they are having one long emotional reaction. That's why it's so important to be aware of your thoughts, to address them and take care of any negative thinking habits before they escalate and form a subconscious pattern, and basically stop you from growing as a person in your whole life. And so learning how to shorten refractory period of emotional reaction is really where the work starts. And this is where Self-Coaching UK can help. Although depending on the type of negative thoughts you are dealing with will influence which course you pick. So pop over and see what we have on offer. And if you are unsure about which course is right for you, then you can contact me through the contact form and I will be in touch. So thank you for listening, guys, and see you over at Self-Coaching UK.